Hi, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural 2019 edition of the Hot Stove. I'm Jordan Bateman, Vice President Communications over here at the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association. Joined with...
And I am Maclean K. I'm the Editor-in-Chief here at the Orca, joining you live from the very lived-in legislature in Victoria.
The lived-in legislature. Now, Maclean, I have to say, well, first of all, Happy New Year to you. I hope you had a great Christmas.
We did, and Happy New Year to you and your family as well.
Thank you, thank you. Now, I have to say that even while all of you ink-stained wretches, you political hack reporter types over there in the legislature, you were barely sobering up from New Year's Eve when John Horgan pulled the pin and said, we are going to a by-election in Nanaimo. Not just any by-election, Maclean. You've nicknamed it...
I've trademarked it, the mother of all by-elections.
Mother of all by-elections. Yep, this is for all the marbles. Right now it is, 42 seats BC Liberal, 41 NDP, 3 Green. That means the Green NDP coalition's up 44-42. But,
that could all change.
Math right? 43, 42. Anyways, what happens if the Liberals pull this out, somehow win in the NDP heartland, in the NDP stronghold of Nanaimo? It would be a dead heat with only lonely independent speaker Darryl Plecas to break ties.
Whom I saw just a few minutes ago, here in the lived-in legislature, looking circumspect as always. But it's there's going to be national attention on this by-election for obvious reasons. I mean, if it does, let's be clear. This does not mean if the BC Liberals should win this by-election. This does not mean, as you say, that they instantly have a majority. It means a tie, which effectively means the government doesn't fall, but it does make it considerably more difficult for it procedurally, and that the margin of error for them becomes not effectively, it becomes literally zero.
Yeah, and then any time that you go into a committee, the speaker does not sit for every single debate in the legislature. He comes off, and then NDP has to go to the bench, and every single piece of legislation there can be defeated, 43-42, because of course, even though he's not sitting there, the speaker doesn't wander in to vote on these pieces of legislation, and would still need everything to work to pass it. It certainly ties their hands. Look, practically speaking, though, it plunges us into a spring election campaign. Mm-hmm. You just can't exist in that kind of tight time frame for long. And quite credibly, Andrew Wilkinson could make the case. Listen, Mr. Premier, you've lost this by-election in your stronghold of Nanaimo. This is the Red Keep. This is King's Landing. This is this is Casterly Rock. This is the Lannisters' base of power here. You've lost that, and you lost proportional representation on something that you actively campaigned for. And remind me, at the very end of this, let's talk about Andrew Weaver trying to backpedal for Prop Rep. But anyways.
We can do that, yes.
Honestly, if he could backpedal that fast in the streets of Victoria, he wouldn't need a car to get around. But, it does kind of evaporate any kind of moral authority. Plus, you have the leader of the Greens saying, look, CASA's at an end, we need a new CASA. That's a governing agreement. I think Andrew Wilkinson could quite credibly say, look, you've got to go into an election campaign, and you have real confidence votes, throne speech, budget, all those things have to get pass muster in the House. That would be tough to do at a 43-43.
Well, that's it exactly. I mean, that's also setting aside accidents like, we're the only legislature in the country where we're separated by an ocean from the main population base. I mean, the winter happens, people miss flights, miss ferries, things happen. And that's also setting aside something like, let's say an NDP or a Green backbencher decides, you know what? No, I don't like this part of the budget. Tough. What's the carrot in that case?
That's a good point. Like, you could have and not to throw him under the bus because I don't think he'd do it, but Adam Olsen could go totally rogue and say, you know what, Saanich and the North Islands, that's his riding, right? It deserves better. We deserve more. I get confused with Saanich. I was talking to Justin McElroy on another story with CBC yesterday. We were talking about amalgamations of municipalities. I'm like, there's too many. There's Saanich, Central Saanich, Saanich Junior, Saanich Tin, Saanich. There's too many Saaniches. Anyways.
Son of Saanich, you're right. It is. We have a lot of Saaniches here in Victoria. But, Adam Olsen could very, very, very realistically go to the Premier's office and say, you know what? I want a bridge to Salt Spring.
Yeah. Can you imagine? Oh, my God. He'd get it, too, because...
He probably would. I mean, that would be a bad example because that would actually be unpopular. But he could say, you know what? The next 2 ferries you buy for BC Ferries, they're doing the Gulf Islands. No, we're not discussing this.
Yeah, pretty amazing. So, that's the problem with 43-43 Parliament. So, Not to mention the fact that any day now we're going to get the news that will make us all puke, as promised by the Speaker of the House. And if we're all able to somehow hold the puke within, Darryl Plecas has said that he will resign. So,
speaking of promises that are likely to be walked back, I don't see a universe in which Darryl Plecas resigns based on the collective failure of British Columbians to vomit on command.
I was going to bet the Bateman family compound on this one. It seemed like a lock. For sure he would go with that. No. So let's talk about Nanaimo a little bit here. It is absolutely a NDP stronghold. Only twice, I looked up, since 1963, only in 2 elections have the Free Enterprise Party managed to win. That was Frank Ney back in 1969 for the Socreds, whose daughter Michelle is now running for the Green Party. So Frank, may have won the mayoralty many times in Nanaimo, may have been an MLA, but couldn't manage to keep his daughter on the Free Enterprise side of the spectrum. But whatever. And
the other one almost doesn't count.
Yeah. Do you know the other one's name?
2001.
Do you remember the other one's name?
Yeah, I've spoken with him recently, and I'm freezing
Mike
on
Hunter.
you now.
It's Mike Hunter.
That's right. Thank you.
Mike Hunter, 2001. That was the landslide. But even with the landslide for the BC Liberals, it took a perfect NDP Green split for Mike Hunter to win that riding.
Mike Hunter, who actively campaigned for Leonard Krogh to become mayor of Nanaimo, thus creating the situation we're in now, the mother of all by-elections.
I do love that. I do love that he did that. But see, I went back and looked at recent trends, right? In 2005, Leonard Krogh, the NDP MLA, won by 18. That lead slipped to 17 4 years later, 17 points. It slipped to 10 in 2013. And it was that 46-36 win in 2013 that really got the Liberals thinking, hey, maybe we should put some resources in Nanaimo because maybe we could swing it. There was also a boundary change. And if you had taken the 2013 results, Krogh would have only won by about 6.5 points. The problem is the Liberals came forward with what some within the party, Mike MacDonald, thought was a star candidate. It turned out she was not. I think it's fair to say she underperformed there, Paris Gaudette. And Krogh extended the lead back to 14 points in 2017. So, but governments never win by-elections, right?
That's true. It's only happened, I want to say twice in history, although it could be. Is it
both
times
by one.
I'm feeling Vaughn Palmer is going to at me and say, well, actually, no, in 1952, which is the kind of thing Vaughn does, and that's why he's Vaughn Palmer. But the last 2 times it's happened were both the premier, Christy Clark. So, it is unusual. And in both of those situations, she wasn't facing an electorate that was angry about the speculation tax and about the property taxes going up explicitly because of the provincial government. It's just supremely awkward timing for the NDP.
Yeah, no, exactly. And look, those of us out here in the Fraser Valley say, hey, the NDP won Chilliwack once. The very forgettable Gwen Omani was the NDP MLA for Chilliwack for a few months until from between a by-election and the general. So anything can happen. My gut says the NDP are going to pull this out. It's such a pure NDP ride, and there's so much on the line. But then again, every time I start to come to that point, something else kind of crops up. Prop rep failed there, 55-45.
That's true. And, there's the Greens will dispute. In fact, I had this conversation yesterday with Vaughn Palmer when he was saying that the Green candidate and any credibility that she builds is necessarily going to hurt the NDP. I don't agree with that blanket statement. The Greens themselves will tell you their own numbers say they take certainly more votes from the NDP than they do from Liberals, but it's not overwhelming. It's not even 3/4, 1/4. It's more like 60-40. And I think in a lot of ridings that's true. I'm not sure how that will apply or play in Nanaimo. So I think that a 3-way race certainly makes it more interesting, but it doesn't necessarily exclusively hurt the NDP. The other thing that is really interesting about all this is that this didn't have to happen at all. I think that after the dust settled and we learned that last year that John Horgan would become the premier, I think most people assumed that Leonard Krogh would be in cabinet.
Yeah.
The man is, let's give him his due. He's a veteran. He's a well-respected voice, usually a moderate one. I think a lot of people saw him in the role that David Eby's in now. And when he got left aside out in the cold, his hometown needed him. and here we are.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a grave political error by the Horgan team. But, I think maybe Horgan thought to himself, well, I've already put... I kind of see Krogh as a little bit like Mike Farnworth, right?
Yeah.
respectful guy, can pick up the phone and talk to people on the other side of the aisle. Definitely partisan, definitely believes,
Oh, of course.
definitely an ideologue, but not that, the crusading activist David Eby type, right?
Yeah, no, I think Krogh was respected across party lines, and again, you make a good point. We're not saying the man wasn't partisan. He was. You don't get to be this point without being at least a little partisan. But Krogh would also be seen socially with members from the other side. That's not something that I've heard David Eby accused of too often. Now, Eby had been there a very long time. He was a respected voice. He was a lawyer, and Horgan may have thought he already had too many people on the island as it was. We'll find something for Leonard down the road.
Yeah. I hear David Eby isn't seen with a lot of people on his own side either, so who knows?
Well, somebody internally is going to wear the prop rep defeat, and that's just the way politics works. Right. If you think that we're piling on David Eby, it's just not true. If this had happened, in the BC Liberal government, we'd be deciding which minister kind of bungled the file. Look, it happened. Less than 17% of British Columbians voted for proportional representation. Yeah. That is a catastrophic failure when you consider it was supported by two of the province's three major parties.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. So Nanaimo, there was that narrowing gap. It got blown open last time. I keep going back and forth on it. Look, I think for Wilkinson, honestly, even just getting close, giving the NDP a scare, if they're counting ballots late into the night, just before they've declared a winner, I think that's another strong step forward for Wilkinson. Obviously, you want to win, but sometimes in politics, moral victories are important too. And if you can cut in this all-important by-election and do that. By the way, I disagree with you on the Greens. I think the stat's correct, and I think that for the last election, you did see a lot of BC Liberal voters frustrated with Christy Clark, part votes with the Greens. I don't think that's going to happen here. If anything, I think you'll see them take more from the NDP simply because if you're an NDP voter but you don't love everything that's going on, you can safely park your vote with the Greens knowing that the coalition will survive.
And that's a very good point.
So, I'm not quite sure about that. And I do think Michelle Ney has a built-in brand name there in Old Nanaimo. So it'll be interesting to see who the BC Conservatives bring forward. I talked to Aaron Gunn, who is a young guy who works with BC Proud, former Canadian Taxpayers Federation, campus club coordinator. He ran a group of campus clubs called Generation Screwed. He has been running around the province. I should say right. He's been going around the province, and there's a lot of talk about him running for the Conservative Party leadership, although prop rep kind of kills the prestige of that brand.
It harshed that buzz.
When I heard that the Conservatives were looking at a candidate in Nanaimo, I know he lives on the island. He told me he's not running there. I'm not sure who else they would have in the hopper. The one thing about Nanaimo is they've had such huge municipal infighting. You can't take anyone from that realm. So all those guys are toxic. And, it's almost like a completely new generation, which is frankly why you're seeing a parachute candidate from Galliano Island like Sheila Malcolmson for the NDP.
Yeah. And then again, it's almost hard to blame the NDP because we haven't touched on this at all. As lost in all this is why Leonard Krogh felt compelled to run for mayor in the first place. Is that, the Nanaimo City Hall has sort of taken over from Toronto as being like the national, oh my God, what's happening there? We could spend half an hour talking about all the things that happened in City Hall there, but suffice it to say, please Google it and read about it. But suffice it to say, when the organizers went to Leonard Krogh and said, your city needs you, that wasn't hyperbole. It's this whole situation is just this long comedy of errors and unique situations. It's kind of amazing to look back and say, right, that was a key part of all this.
Yeah, and there's one other person running. We should mention. I had to look it up. Robin Richardson, the leader of the Vancouver Island Party, which has one goal in mind: succession of the Vancouver Island from British Columbia to become Canada's 11th province. There are times, Maclean, where I will confess, I think to myself, the VIP, if they ran in Langley, would probably pick up several votes to send you folks on your way. Although I know that you yourself would be terribly disappointed to cut civilization of Vancouver Island off from us unwashed masses here on the
Well, I
mainland.
would be disappointed, but I also would have a better chance of personally becoming premier at some point. But you never know. I also think you're right. I think in Langley, the VIP party, which by the way is the best acronym in politics.
Absolutely,
let's be honest.
absolutely.
Full credit.
Yeah.
And but it's a bit like the Parti Québécois occasionally raising money in the prairies, which does happen.
Yes, yes. Although it would be interesting if Vancouver Island went, the rest of us might just join up with Alberta and off we go. Just separate from Vancouver.
It would change the calculus for the. We shouldn't even waste any moments at all talking about this because it's absolutely not going to happen. But it would obviously change the calculus for the NDP, and not in a good way.
Let's do a little side bet here. So I believe, yes, in 2017, the Libertarian candidate finished dead last in Nanaimo riding, 277 votes.
Wow.
VIP party, over under 277. Over or under?
Oh boy. For fun,
Better brand.
I'm going
better
to
brand.
For fun, I'm going to say over, only
Over,
because
okay.
it's. But it almost has to be handicapped because it's a by-election and turnout will. We say turnout will probably be less because it's a by-election, but again, this is the mother of all by-elections, and so I think a lot of the usual wisdom doesn't apply.
Okay, well, I mean, we can do it by percentage. He was almost exactly down the nose, 1%.
Well, then I will take the over for the VIP.
I will take the under, but I don't feel good about it. So. Now, there's actually a bet Chris Gardner, our president here at ICBA, and I have. We made it shortly after CASA was originally signed. We bet on the next election, and I said that we'd be in election by February 14th, 2019. I really need this Nanaimo by-election to go my way, Maclean. So anything you could do to help that happen so I can win my bet and get a free lunch from Chris Gardner would be helpful.
The only thing I will say on that date, this was pointed out recently by, I think it was Adam Sterling on CFAX, is all the people who are talking about a spring election, there is a significant number of MLAs who don't hit the magical 6-year mark until July.
Oh,
and what happens at the 6-year mark is they're eligible for pensions.
Yeah.
And so if you're a new MLA who is contemplating a spring election and you think, if we just hold the fort until July 1st, I get a paycheck for the rest of my life.
It's hard. Well, that's what happened in 2011. When Christy Clark came in 2011. She wanted to go right to the polls in the spring. She, I think, won in January. She wanted to be at the polls by March or April, get her own mandate. She would have lost terribly. But people like, I think Mary Polak was one of those folks who was in that, not to say she didn't want an election, but Mary was in that kind of pension window. Yeah. And it doesn't vest till June 1st, and the caucus basically said, nope, we can't go until after that date. So pretty interesting there. But it just takes one.
That's right.
It just takes...
You're right. I mean, Adam Olson, we're looking at you.
Yeah. Well, look, and
poor Adam.
No, poor Adam. And look, if you're the NDP, if you're Horgan and it didn't go your way, and you're at 43-43, this thing is a monster to try to manage. And you were talking about expending incredible political capital, while frankly Wilkinson could still quietly zip around the province and be meeting people and doing stuff. You have to be in the House. It's a huge advantage to the BC Liberals, and it's these things. These governments don't fall. Governments, because I think we had that Chuck Cadman vote, remember, and so we have this picture of how governments fall. It's a death by 1,000 cuts up to that, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And once you start,
it's not always the Joe Clark where they you can literally point to a single event. You're right. It's usually 1,000 cuts. But you make a really good point. Is that if the Liberals aren't actively trying to bring down the government on a day-to-day basis while the House is sitting, they keep a skeleton crew here, maintain the same level of opposition and holding the government to account. While you're right, sending Andrew Wilkinson or Mary Polak or whoever else across the province to raise money and quite frankly anger and frustration at things like the speculation tax and the property taxes, while the NDP are very much forced to be here every day. And after making such a big show of saying that they would never cancel a fall session again. Okay.
Yeah, great point. Yeah. Look, is every MLA and political hack in the province moving to Nanaimo for these next 4 weeks?
Oh yeah, I think it is gonna be a very good time to own a hotel in Nanaimo. I mean, the NDP are holding their provincial council there. You'll correct me on the date. I want to say it's 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, Saturday the 12th. Saturday the 12th.
Yeah, you will see every member of the NDP that they can shoehorn into Nanaimo there for a single 2 or 3 hour meeting, and then 48 hours of knocking on every single door in the riding. The Greens are also pouring a significant amount of effort into this riding. We asked Andrew Weaver at these year-end interview, I mean, how seriously are you going to campaign, because it might jeopardize the ruling coalition, and he was, no, we're in it to win it. And you know what? I believe him, because for the reason you said before, where it actually doesn't jeopardize the ruling coalition, and in fact would strengthen his hand. But also, after having to look the other way on things like LNG and Site C, and even on the speculation tax, he cannot afford to look like he's just going to hand the NDP back their seat in Nanaimo.
No, you're exactly right. Sheila Malcolmson, by the way, NDP candidate, also opposed Site C. But I'm sure she'll be all for it now, warm and fuzzy, now that Mungal and Eby and Horgan can straighten her out on her.
Well, I was going to say, Michelle Mungal and Lana Popham can give her lessons on biting your lip as you smile and nod at these things.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Anything else we should talk about in Nanaimo? I'm taking a look at the calendar. There's all sorts of stuff happening. Yeah, but no legislature doesn't sit until February 12th. So, one thing about Horgan is he said he wanted to have a member from Nanaimo seated for certainly for budget, and hopefully by throwing a speech. It looks like he'll be close to that. So he's kept his word there. It'll be interesting to see what issues emerge. I checked out the spending limits, by the way. And this is where it gets hilarious, because you don't have a provincial campaign, you don't have that overarching spending limit for the whole province. Basically, these parties are able to spend about $50,000 a piece. And if you're a third party, if ICBA, for example, wanted to register and do something, we'd be limited to about $3,500.
Wow.
So if you're a Facebook user in Nanaimo, prepare to be peppered with ads by political parties, because that's all they can afford. I mean, I'm not even sure, like $50,000, I think there's about 40,000 registered voters in Nanaimo, something like that.
I think that's very close.
It'd be hard to mail each of them for that.
Yeah, I mean, even things like billboards, lawn signs.
Yeah.
It's funny because we're not kidding when we call this the mother of all by-elections. It's hard to think of another example of the fate of an entire province may rest on a by-election. But by the same token, if you're in Nanaimo, you may not actually see a lot of on the street evidence of it because of exactly that. Parties can't spend on things like lawn signs and billboards and radio and TV ads.
Yeah, I will be interested to see what turnout is. Obviously, the importance of it, you'd think it would be similar to general, but Nanaimo folks have dealt with a referendum on the arena a year and a half ago, dealt with a very messy municipal council and then a rough municipal council election in October, dealt with prop rep in November. Now they're going to the polls in January. There is genuine voter fatigue. Like, that does happen.
Absolutely.
People might be like, forget it, like, whatever. If I'm around, I'm around. I'll vote. If not, I'm not.
Well, exactly, and it is a by-election, and you've also left out the fact that really the federal campaign has unofficially started as well, and Vancouver Island is increasingly a battleground for both the Liberals and the NDP, so, there's a lot of people vying for their attention.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about my favorite segment, The Good Doctor. The Good Doctor, Andrew Weaver, is backpedaling off of prop rep. I forget which. I know you mentioned it to you at the Orca, but he did kind of circled back and made more comments about how prop rep is not that big a deal. Yeah, it's part of the pillars of greenism that they want electoral reform, but it's not why he got into politics. Damn it, he got into politics to fight climate change. Yada yada yada. This from the guy who was campaigning in front of a massive rally with the big pro-rep letters behind him, with the premier grinning ear to ear as they were given a hero's welcome before the vote. A guy who basically took Sonia Furstenow's responsibilities away from her and gave her one, which was win prop rep. This is your job. Eat, sleep, breathe prop rep. You and Bob Deeth or whatever his name is from Maple Ridge at the end of the year, you're going to coach. You're going to bring it home. Like, come on. This is like, the backpedal on this is, I guess he has lots of practice. He backpedaled on Site C, backpedaled on LNG, backpedaled on bringing the government down over all these different issues. But come on, Doc, like, give me a break.
Well, Andrew Weaver seems to have a habit of trying to have it both ways. And this is a good example of that, to be perfectly honest. It's he very obviously did campaign on Prop Rep. His original suggestion, if you recall, was to not have a referendum at all, but just to impose it. Yeah. Which, I mean, good on Premier Horgan for saying no. And then after the fact saying, well, you know, whatever, if it happens, great. If not, whatever. He said this a couple of times too. I mean, he's on a more sort of general level. He tries to. He's an opposition party when it suits him, and part of the governing coalition when that suits him. And you know, as he and I have discussed in person, and also via the Orca, I mean, that just doesn't work that way. Yeah. You're not in any meaningful sense an opposition party. Yeah. And you cannot in any meaningful sense say, yeah, you really care about Prop Rep. I mean, if that's true, then you went to a lot of rallies and published a lot of material indicating precisely the opposite.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big Survivor fan, and the way you prove loyalty in Survivor isn't through talk, it's through casting the vote at the Tribal Council at the end of every episode. And he's proven his loyalty over and over again by casting a vote, even on things he hated and loathed with the NDP. He has never voted with the BC Liberals on anything since the NDP took power. So.
That's true, and in fact, that's even his caucus mates can say that they have. I think it was one single amendment at the very tail end of the last session, and I don't even remember what it was. But Adam Olsen and Sonia Versanow voted with the opposition. Weaver did not. Yeah. So yes, he does still have a perfect record.
So the tribe has spoken. Andrew Weaver, you are part of the government, apparently. All right. Well, anything else, Maclean? I guess will you be wandering up to Nanaimo at some point and kicking the tires, seeing what's happening?
Well, I hope so. Any excuse to go up to the hub city is always welcome. But
now, is it the harbor city or the hub city or both?
You know what? You see Hub City on online, but it's Harbor City, I think, when you drive past the sign on the way into town. So I'll take either one. It's, as we were saying, it's going to be interesting. We need sort of a reason to go up there. Maybe it's a debate or something like that, and we don't have like a calendar of events yet. But yes, I very much want to go up. I quite like Nanaimo.
Yeah, you know, when I was with the Taxpayers Federation, I was fortunate enough to go speak in Nanaimo a few times and always loved it, and people were always incredibly kind to me. Maybe it's worth going. It's funny, we're headed into U.S. primary season, and so just starting the conversation with Chris Gardner, our president, about him and I doing a little fantasy trip to Iowa during the Democratic primaries, just to see all these candidates in these small little situations. Certainly the Democrats will have 15 or 20 people traipsing around Iowa roughly this time next year. So Nanaimo, it's like a mini Iowa here. It's this is where all the attention in the BC political world will be focused. Nanaimo, if there's anything you ever wanted, now is the time to ask for it. You're probably going to get it.
Yeah, if you want an NHL team, now's the time. You want the Lions to move to Nanaimo permanently? They'll find a way. We're prepared to have those discussions. Yeah,
they'll find a way. All right, we'll be back.
Ironically, they will now find a way to get to yes.
Yes. Yeah, excellent. We will be back next week. Rick Clough is in on Wednesday doing some tapings for the Orca, and we will reconvene the Hot Stove on Thursday or Friday.
It's whoever his first guest is. It is going to be a major climb down from Santa Claus. Is all I'm going to say.
I heard a lot about the Grinch's appearance on the Orca.ca.
That's true.
Mainly from my family, not my wife, who found it eye-rollingly embarrassing, but my parents found it quite humorous and shared it with the relatives across the country, which God only knows what they think of BC politics based on my terrible singing
If they
voice.
paid attention at all, I don't think that was going to be the straw that broke that camel's back. But
I make this resolution every year, but 2019 is the year I will not sing on social media. I rebroke it. We did Training Thursday here this morning, and I sang a little. So there you go. If only I was a good singer, you'd never shut me up.
Well, Daryl Pluckus is trying to make the people of BC throw up, and maybe we're doing our part.
Hey, go track down Pluckus. Is Mullen in town too? Did you see him?
I didn't see him. I ran into the speaker of the hallway. We had a very brief hello. I wished him Happy New Year, and he mumbled something back.
Happy New Year, and he was like, "Oh, screw you, kid." All right, have a great one. We will talk to you again soon. And from Daryl Pluckus, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.